Interesting, see this dichotomy. We want the world to be our play field. We want to play in the world. But when we try and describe our own world, we limit it so much as to me, my small world. So in terms of wanting it, we want it all. But in terms of owning it, we just want to own that little bit and be responsible for it.
Right. And so just like in a similar way, if you see the corporate sector, there is two such legal rules that have been put into place.
Arjun, you were talking about the two things in the corporate sector.
Yeah, I was saying there are two rules where we are talking about how ownership and responsibility. Now, it's very interesting, both those terms, because one of the rules is about limited liability. As you know, most organizations are called public limited or private limited. I don't know. I wonder if people have really tried to understand what does it mean. Well, it simply means that you have limited liability. That means you have limited responsibility. Though you can earn your money from it, though you can do what you want from it, but you have limited liability in terms of the consequences you face in case something goes wrong. So it's not my personal assets which will get which will be frozen. Yeah, it'll be the company's assets get frozen if something goes wrong. If environmental disaster comes up, then you're not personally responsible as an individual. The firm is not responsible. The shareholders and the board will not be held responsible for it. So it's very interesting that suddenly you have supposed to be the owner, but you have limited responsibility. Now that's kind of a paradox I've never heard of resolved properly, right? How can you be an owner and have limited responsibility? Ownership means that I'm completely having full ownership of that place, and anything that happens, any consequence or any reward, is mine, and I'm responsible for making that happen.
So it starts with an unfair premise.
Yeah. So the whole idea when this was first formed in the US as limited liability firm and limited liability ownership, it was a great device in which it allowed people to come in and do something innovative, creative, and not have consequences in case things didn't go off as well as they should, and so on. But I think it's really lived its in the life that it did. In that context, it might have worked. In this context today, all you do is you promote speculative and ownership, which is kind of actually a fraud in the name of ownership. And the real ownership, as I've always been saying, should be with the people who are inside, and therefore those people who can make meaning of the place, who earn from it, who really call it their own. And like I said before, if you really see own is an anagram for now, OWN. Unfortunately, the ownership patterns today only make you think of the future, because they're about investment. They're about how my investment can be best earnings per share in the future, and therefore in the medium term, in the long term, how can I make the most of this investment? And the now, therefore, of the firm is not important. While to somebody who's inside the organization like you and me, it's only about the now. It's about the community of the organization.
Absolutely.
It's not a property that I can own. It's the community. You can never own a community, can you? So how does that shareholder own a community? And that's why I started to think about how it's time to really take this message to a larger public with something, more like fiction rather than actually non-fiction, and something more serious, and people
and
don't
yet the message would go home.
Yeah, I hope that's right.
No, I'm sure it will. It's a wonderful read. Arjun, tell me at a personal level, what inspires you?
I think reality. I think reality really inspires me. I like the fact that I want to cut through the stories that abound in the world, including the story of the share market and so on, and get to what's the real issues that really are facing the corporate sector, the world, and not just look at many different viewpoints and different stories that are being told to us. So cutting to reality, I think, would be something which really inspires me. So all my writing, all my conversations, all my attempts at insights are to get to what's possibly the real mover of the real motivator of what's going on, rather than to look at the fluff and the stories that are there. So that's possibly my inspiration for writing this as well.
And what's on the anvil next?
Well, like I said, I'm not an author. I'm just a person who works in both corporate sector, voluntary sector, and I have been doing my my work is what really is in the future, which is both the work I do with young people at Prava and what the consulting I do at Vyaktitva. But if there's another book to be written, then it's going to come through that work, and it's not really as if I plan to become an author, a professional author or so.
You know, it's like a bug, and once it bites you, a lot of people say that the desire and the urge to again then put that bit down on paper and then share it, that keeps reoccurring.
Yeah, it's possible, and I think when you say that, I've already written something new actually, and to bring my mother back here, she actually when she read, I gave her a very early copy of this second novel. To me, this is a practice novel actually, and I think really that one's going to be the one which is, to me, much more well read, and people are going to like it more. It's about stories and how the world is run by stories. Okay. And my mother read that book and she said, "This is really good." When I told her this is the Flawed God is coming out, she said, "That's fine, but get back to the get back to your finishing the second one, which I think is really going to make sense to the rest of the world."
I think trust a mother to put the kid right back on track. Okay, you're deviating, get back to it. And I think also that's interesting to know that sometimes we write about what we are passionate about, but when you want to get a message across, it's very important to understand what is it about what I want to say that other people are going to be passionate about.
Very true, very true. Yeah, it shouldn't be just a soliloquy which you're just sitting down in an ivory tower and just expressing yourself. I think there's a lot of that going on nowadays. It's the age of expression, but for me it's critical to get some message across. Certainly, I think that's I don't want to write for myself.
One quick question before we go. A lot of us want to write, and a lot of us want to say, okay, maybe we could also write a book, but how do you start? Where does it begin, and what does it take to make the transition from becoming just a closet writer into somebody saying, I can write a book?
Yeah, and I would say that I think it took me a long time. I mean, it took me many I would say many months and of stolen time from my own work that I was trying to do. But what really I think transformed the whole thing was when I started to give it my full attention, which meant that I needed to take 3 months off and do this. Then it's better to do this rather than try stealing time from my work and try to do this. So then it sort of just starts to fall in place. And the second thing I think is people should stop trying to think of making money out of writing, because there's no money there, and which is why I say I'm not an author. So that's something which people shouldn't be thinking I'm going to make these millions like J.K. Rowling does or some other famous author does. Just write for the happiness of writing, the process of writing, and the joy of being read. Good enough.
Great. Arjun, thank you so much for coming to our studio. Wish you all the best with your book and whatever else you'll be writing. Thank you
so much. Thank you.